I'm Alison Byrne. I'm the Director of Exhibitions and Education at the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art here in Virginia Beach. And I'm thrilled to be joined this morning by Shannon Fitzgerald, who's the Executive Director of the Mennello Museum in Orlando, Florida. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you. Hi, Alison. Good morning.
Great to see you.
Good to see you.
So Shannon is the curator of the exhibition that is currently on view at MOCA, which is Shifting Gaze, a reconstruction of the Black and Hispanic body in contemporary art from the collection of Robert B. Feldman. And we're absolutely thrilled to have this powerful exhibition here at the museum. Thank you so much for sharing it with us, Shannon.
My pleasure.
So I'd love to get started, and if you could tell me a little bit about the impetus for the exhibition, how it came about, and maybe how it ties to some of your previous curatorial work.
Sure. I had the good fortune to be introduced to Dr. Feldman's collection about 8 years ago. He's an avid collector, collects contemporary art from all kinds of genre. But in the last really 5 years, he honed in on focusing on artists of color who were really pushing boundaries about perception. And they were artists, many of them I had worked with, others that I had followed a deep admiration. So it was kind of a kindred appreciation. And he's very generous with his work. And then right up until a couple months before the exhibition opened, he was still avidly adding to his collection with a keen eye on artists that are just emerging in their career, finding footing, finding those great galleries, and before they're rock stars.
And so you made a connection with Robert and was getting to know his collection, but how did you come about thinking about Shifting Gaze, and why was it right for the Mennello Museum at the time when you debuted it there?
Sure. I was looking at a lot of artists and how they were making work about social justice, about visibility, about invisibility, just current with what was going on. And having the opportunity to see the work he was collecting, the timeliness of it all made a lot of sense. And having access to Bob's collection and spending time with it, the connective tissue just happened to me. And all of these artists were challenging how I was looking at their work, and I think how the visitors, hence the gaze and this shifting plane, shifting dynamic in culture that I feel is global, and these American artists are right there.
Do you want to maybe talk just briefly about the title Shifting Gaze and how that connects to art history?
It does. It connects to a power structure within art history, specifically the male gaze, and the male gaze being previously the voice, the owner of art, the commissioner of art, the owner of who's looking at who. Really, the gaze was a controlled narrative. And I feel these artists are changing that narrative. The voice, the agency is giving a new intersecting narrative that is in their own voice and challenging what we think.
And I have to say that was one of the reasons that the staff here at the museum were really drawn to Shifting Gaze, because I feel like these artists are really challenging us to be open to new perspectives and to listen and to empathize with others. And besides that, the work is just so powerful and really draws you in. So I'm thrilled that we can share it with our visitors. So Shannon, I should mention that you and I started working together back in 2018 when you first mentioned that you would be traveling the exhibition. And although we've been working together for that long, we haven't had a chance to meet. And unfortunately, due to COVID, our meeting that was supposed to take place in March hasn't happened. But we are thrilled that WHRO has brought us here together to have this conversation. And we want to thank them, and also just shout out that we have Mike from WHRO in the galleries who's going to be showing us some of the artwork today and getting up close and really showing us all the details. So Shannon, let's look at some highlights of the exhibition. I know you've selected a few for us to look at, and the first one is the artist Nina Chanel Abney, which is the cover of the book that you published along with the exhibition, and is really the kind of hero image of the exhibition as a whole.
Yeah, I think Nina's work is so striking. It's colorful, it's visual, it's graphic, it just communicates so much. And I think its immediate lighthearted sensibility, graphic style, comic style, drags us in, brings us into the picture where we might see a more complicated narrative happening. You have this black athlete. You have question marks and X's and score. It suggests he's in the middle of an activity, but this large figure is vulnerable. And I think it conjures the treatment of black athletes, particularly at this time, and the expectation of athletes. His feet are in the water. Is he playing volleyball? Is the expectation to do football or basketball? And these are wonderful questions with this unexpected palette of pink and yellow.
Yeah, I read an interview with her where she says that her work is easy to digest but hard to swallow, which I thought was just such a good way of describing it. She uses emojis in her work and also kind of takes inspiration from snapshots of social media and news headlines, which really draws you in. But it's my understanding that she doesn't give you a description of what the work is about, right? She leaves it open to your interpretation.
Yeah, I think the cultural signifiers weigh in and you can grasp the layered information. Bob was at her opening at Jack Shaman and asked her what 33 meant, and she didn't reveal it.
So she's true to her word. I also love the fact that she uses spray paint.
I do too, and I think this addresses the materiality that Dr. Feldman is interested in. High paint, low paint, across the medium. You could feel how her hand is there when she's stenciling.
Absolutely. All right, Mike, let's move on to our next work of art, which is by Mark Thomas Gibson. And this is such a powerful work of art that's really resonated with everything that's going on in our world today. It feels more poignant than ever.
It's a great piece to talk about right after Nina's work. Mark also employs a graphic sensibility, more from the graphic novel, and nods to comics as well, but with very serious content.
And I think artists taking inspiration from history in particular is a running theme throughout the exhibition.
Yeah, I think this piece was made following the events in Charlottesville and certainly resonant now, using language, the police in riot gear. I think the narrative that's put forth, we don't know what took place behind, and we don't know about the future, and I think he elicits a response to the viewer. Are we somehow complicit? Is how I look at this and think about the gaze. Are we involved in this act? Are we witnesses? I think there's a lot of false truths in his work as well. He gathers motifs that maybe don't really exist, and he juxtaposes them with language. That American flag is not as the American flag is and should be, and so on and so forth. I think there's a reference to the Peanuts with again, his use of language. So is it a comedic situation? Is it reprehensible? I don't think we know for sure.
So next up, we're going to take a look at the work by Joanne Capote, an artist from Cuba, and it's one of the few sculptures that are in the exhibition. Mike is getting a great close-up for us there. So Shannon, what was your thought when you were including this piece in the exhibition?
I think this has enormous gravitas conceptually, but also the massive weight of the sculpture. It is the human curvature of the spine comprised of handcuffs. Joanne is from Cuba and talking about the weight of freedom, the weight of free movement and expression. And you see these wonderful details of this kind of bronze cartilage and just the human aspect, and it's suspended without its body, and just the weight. The tool of arrest is kind of addressing humanity and what's in the balance.
And this piece is called New Man, and I read about Joanne that he actually comes up with his titles first before he creates his sculptures.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting discipline he imposes on himself. His work carries a lot of themes about movement in a communist culture and about expression, and it's all rooted to that human figure.
And this piece almost feels like a specimen in a way, the way it's hanging
It does. It also looks like it's in a butcher shop. It's the remains. It's skeletal. And I think when we think about incarceration, and particularly right now with handcuffs on black and brown bodies, particularly men, and how you are restricted. I mean, what handcuffs do, they're painful, you're restricted. And so to have the accumulation here is very powerful.
So Shannon, I think it would be great to hear a little bit, just to back up slightly, about your curatorial practice in general, because you have worked with some of these artists before, in particular Radcliffe Bailey, who we're about to look at next. You worked with him for the first time over 20 years ago, right?
I did. Radcliffe has garnered my attention when I was first starting out, and I was a graduate intern at the High Museum. I had the good fortune to see his work and be introduced, and then later work with him. And to see this piece made in 2019 is just extraordinary. It evokes the figure. It's a shrouded figure. One of the most important motifs in Radcliffe's work are the railroad tracks. And the railroad tracks signify movement, direction. I think they're printed and painted on this linen shroud, this canvas that drapes, adds weight to this piece. The railroad tracks allude to movements of people for migration, civil rights movement, all the way back to the transatlantic movement, Jewish diasporas. I think the dispersion of people. This piece also, to me, represents an ascension. I think it has spiritual and religious elements. The slave iron bars that are at the neck, the head is composed by a rock with a top hat, just the burden of history. I think this is homage to an ancestral past, but very much addresses imbalance now. And that's what's beautiful about Radcliffe's work. It moves through time. It really is about transcendence and ascendance, but all through time to have meaning in the now. And also the collar generates a shadow on the wall that really represents the cosmos, the four directions. The cosmic language in Radcliffe's work is also very compelling.
Yeah, I was just going to say that that shadow on the wall is particularly arresting and really brings it to life in a new way. So Mike, let's take a look at the work by Hank Willis Thomas, which is just to the right of this piece. And Hank is a photo conceptual artist. He is very interested in exploring history, and it's kind of a through line of his work. No matter what his practice is, Hank works in photo, but also public art and sculpture, and really pushes the boundaries of his art to engage with civic engagement and social issues.
This is a super exciting piece and represents a new exploration in Hank Willis Thomas' work, rooted in photography. But what we immediately see is this white turbulence, white noise. It's abstract. It's as if he caught moving light. Always interested in revolution across the globe and the civil rights movement. He's a keen archivist, and this image is based on an image from 1968 in the American unrest in this country. And using the tools of light and reflexivity, reflective material, this is an interactive piece. When a camera light is on it, it reveals other information that is not abstract, that is what it is documented, and it's the harsh realities of, in this particular image, police violence.
So this piece really requires viewer engagement to activate it and to be seen as the artist intends, which I love about it.
Well, and I think it's a piece about concealing and revealing, and who tells the narrative, and you just look beneath the surface, shine a light on the subject matter, and it's there. And these are hard truths, but nonetheless, this image is from 50 years ago, and we're having the same conversation today.
And I believe this is one of a series of works that Hank did, and I think the series was called What We Ask Is Simple. And he went through archives from libraries and newspapers, and so he really documented protests from the 1910s through, early 2000s in this body of work. And so this is just one piece from a larger body of work by the artist.
Alison, I think that's a great thing to think about when you're looking at every artist's work, that many of them are part of a body exploring a particular subject.
So Shannon, one of the themes in the exhibition is actually that of the implied body or the absence of the body. Can you talk to me a little bit about that theme and how you explored it in the exhibition?
Absolutely. I think there's a balance between figuration and abstraction that works really well. This piece also speaks to visibility and erasure. And I think the erasure of knowledge and who's writing history is through the books, encyclopedic books, history books, children's books. This piece is called Love is Complicated, and they are spines of books and books covers that the artist weaves, reconstructs, deconstructs, sews back together in this wonderful abstract grid where considerations of color is considered. Two of the books that we can see is the Book of Knowledge and Ethnicity in the United States. I think Levi Jones thinks about our education system and that education is power, and that how do we recognize and understand the authenticity of what is written in our books, and powerfully erases that to question how we understand knowledge and trust it. It also references the spine. As we think about Joanne Capote and the spine, this is the spine of the book, and they're torn and they're fragmented and they're barely holding on. This is a very delicate piece and purposefully not entirely reconstructed.
That's a really interesting connection you made, and one that we hadn't made when we laid out the exhibition, but coincidentally they are kind of adjacent to each other and talking to each other in a way.
That's the joy of curating, and that it lives after the exhibition opens and you reflect on what you just did.
So Shannon, the last piece we wanted to highlight today was by a local artist for you, award-winning Wanda Raimundi Ortiz.
Yes, we were so fortunate to have Wanda in our community making work that is performative, that uses her own body, that's very engaging. Wanda creates archetypal figures, exploring notions of stereotypes through her own body. And the gaze here is hers in a character role, thinking about domesticity, thinking about being colonial, other, foreign. Wanda elegantly explores binary ideas of the Latinx woman, that being a mother, that being a sister, a housekeeper, Puerto Rican, American, white, black, and brown. And all these complexities come together at intersections through photography, through still. I think what is so beautiful about this piece is the self-ownership. She is defiant. She looks at you and she is asserting her worth and her value, despite being called a reina. This is part of a queen series that she explores aspects of being a queen, but she addresses being dismissed and how women are objectified very poignantly here.
And this is a still from a performance, right?
Yes. She created a series called Reinas and Queens, and everyone she's transformed into royalty by using unexpected materials. The castaway, the garbage. She's recycled a great deal in a lot of her work. Again, paying attention to what would be discarded, overlooked, and dismissed. Wanda also explores ideas of sexual violence in her work, and that violence can be physical, but emotionally and psychic. And I think that comes through the lens of photography for her.
And you told me a story when we spoke in the past about a performance that she did in Orlando that just really struck me. I'd love if you could share that with us.
Sure. Wanda is first generation New York, Puerto Rican, and lots of family in Puerto Rico and travels there. But after the hurricanes and after aid was having difficulty reaching the people in there, in Puerto Rico, she and her costume designer, she works with a costume designer, traveled and gathered debris. Think of the tarps and bottled water and things that are found on the street, and basically it served two purposes. They helped clean up Puerto Rico, and then they packed that debris and brought it back to Orlando and made this stunning gown, this very performative gown associated with Puerto Rican dance. And she did a procession down our downtown street singing Puerto Rican songs and had Afro-Caribbean dancers as a queen of this debris of the hurricanes marched down our city hall, was defiant and owned the pain that was going on in Puerto Rico.
A powerful statement. So Shannon, what would you like visitors to take away from this exhibition when they come and explore the work of these 27 artists?
I hope they take away the beauty and the narrative and the power behind looking and seeing and going deeper in the way we look and think of the other and our neighbor and greater humanity. I hope that there's an optimism that elicits fear, and they think about beauty, and that the intersection of multiple narratives is an exciting thing to consider.
You know, I've been, spending time with these works for the past few months, even though the museum has been closed, and before then spending time in the catalog and really thinking a lot about it. But every time I go back to these, I learn something new and I see something new, and I just find the artists to be so inspiring and really making me think about our world today and what's going on and to make deeper connections.
Yeah, I think I hope that the exhibition is a proposal to look deeper and kinder and be optimistic about a greater humanity.
So Shannon, I know this is a traveling exhibition. It debuted at your museum at the Mennello, and then we are the first location on the tour. Where is it going to after Virginia MOCA?
Yeah, it's going to the Peeler Arts Center at DePaul University, Greencastle, Indiana. And then after that, it opens at Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia.
I'm sure they, like we, are really thrilled to have the exhibition and to be able to use it as a kind of platform to, talk about important issues in our community and in our society at the moment, and to make community connections and collaborations, and also work with these artists. It's been really wonderful for us to feature some of them, to do educational programming with them, and we're thrilled to think about what the possibilities are after this exhibition of how we can collaborate further.
I'm too excited. I was thrilled that it debuted in a contemporary art museum. That was really important that the artists are presented in that context, because that's where they exist. And then for it to go to educational institutions on campus and be built into the curriculum is another opportunity, and reflects the generosity of Dr. Feldman. He would like his work to get in front of as many people as he can, so they can see these artists and what they're doing.
Absolutely. I think that's amazing that Bob is so generous. I asked him if he missed any of these works, and he said he hasn't lived with many of them before, that he really wants them to be out in the public and to be shared and to be engaged with, which is incredibly generous.
It is.
Well, Shannon, thank you so much for spending time together today. It was great seeing you. It was great to explore the exhibition together, and I hope that we will have the opportunity to meet in reality at some point soon.
I do too. Thank you, Alison. I appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you, Mike, and our friends at WHRO.